G'day, hi, and welcome. Alright, this is a video I make with great regret, fear, and just complete utter disappointment for liberty and freedom. Uh, well, we got a new government changing of the guard, regime change here in Canada, figure of speech, sure. We have Justin Trudeau as our new Prime Minister. And what this video is really about is what we might be expecting in the very near future for, well, we can't really say gun rights in Canada because we never really had gun rights in Canada. From 1898, they've been trying to disarm the people here in Canada ever since then. You know, with the first laws of the BNA Act, basically making handguns, only for, British subjects and stuff like that, and then requiring permits to have a firearm in your home to be able to protect your home or your business. And then from there on, it's always gotten slightly more, authoritarian. And of course, up until the 1950s, we pretty much had machine gun ownership where you could own just about anything. But we've had handgun registry since 1934, which has yet to save a single life or stop a single crime, or it doesn't work. But yet it's been around that long, and it costs millions of dollars a year just to upkeep those pieces of paper in a database somewhere. And of course, in the 1970s, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the father of our now current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, pretty much started the strict gun control footsteps that we see now, and banning of many semi-autos, and of course converting all autos and stuff like that to semi-auto. And then of course by the 1980s we've seen other bills come in, Bill C-17, Bill an older Bill C-51, and then of course the Bill C-68. And of course Bill C-68 is the standing bill that terrorizes gun owners as we speak. But it's going to get worse because there's a new bill on the horizon. It was proposed a little while ago, but it's probably going to come into full flourishing. I believe it is Senate Bill S 231. Pretty sure that's the bill. It was shot down at the time, and it was the Hunters and Anglers and Sports Shooters Act, or whatever it was called. I kind of forget a bit. But anyway, it was shot down. But the proposals in this thing were just completely off the wall for gun owners. It would essentially is the beginning of a gun ban in Canada. And this is definitely going to take place. There's no doubt about it now. By the end of the 4 years of the Trudeau run, there will be probably zero gun ownership in this country. And if there is any gun ownership, black powder might be still allowed. Maybe bolt actions, maybe brake barrels will be allowed, but I doubt it. Lever action, pump action, definitely semi-autos and handguns will be gun, regardless of what classification they were previously. My reasoning for this is just going by the, what they were talking, Justin Trudeau himself was talking about, and of course, if you listen to the Liberal Party members, they're almost all anti-gun. And they almost all take their cue from the Coalition for Gun Control, who is basically an NDP associate that really has brought in, the Coalition for Gun Control has brought in basically gun laws through the United Nations. Now, the United Nations put out a gun law mandate a few years back. Australia adopted it, and they took probably the brunt of the stick. The UK adopted it. They're under way more restriction than us. And then, of course, Norway adopted it, and probably a few other countries, and we adopted it. But we took it, probably the most mild dose was here in Canada. Now, that said, the list of firearms banned in Canada is massive. There are a lot of firearms we do get to enjoy for now, but those firearms will almost all but disappear overnight. For example, all the restricteds are pretty much going to be banned. Justin Trudeau himself, and I quote, "We need to implement Australian-style gun control in Canada." And if you have ever seen what happened to the Australians' beautiful firearms that they had, they did a buyback program, of course, and then bought back hundreds of firearms, and then they just did outright confiscation, and basically people would have XYZ amount of time to bring their firearms to a depot where they would chop them up. Now, of course, if the RCMP does this, I don't know if this happened to the Australians, and if you're Australian, I'm pretty sure you'll probably let me know if this did. But I know I can guarantee you, not only will they chop up our firearms in front of us here in Canada, but they're going to charge you a fee to do this. Guarantee some sort of stupid environment, sustainable development, Agenda 21 pollution fee of basically, hey, well, those chop saw blades aren't cheap, so fork it over. Here you go. Here's your bill for us cutting up your beautiful firearm, and you better say thank you, sir. May I have another? And that's pretty much what's going to happen to us. Now, that said, where's it going to start? Well, it's going to start with the restricteds. ARs guaranteed to be banned. Now, Tony Bernardo from the Shooting Sports Association said that the problem is what they want to do. Okay, number one is sign the United Nations Small Arms Trade Treaty deal. Now, Trudeau has talked about this, and he's flip-flopped back and forth, not really giving you a conclusive answer. So that's technically a yes, he will sign it. That's why he won't tell you directly, because they know that the gun issue is a huge issue here in Canada. Yes, the CBC is biased against firearms, but you notice how they never really cover the issue hardly at all, and it's for one purposeful reason, because every time they do, the only thing they expose is how little they know about actual Canadian gun laws, and more importantly, how the statistics are heavily in favor of gun owners in Canada, meaning the Liberals have a solution looking for a problem, not the other way around. So right now, one of the solutions for the problems they're looking for is basically, to find firearms to demonize. That's so, right now what the CBC's out there doing is talking about a way to convert almost every semi-auto into a full auto. And what they're talking about, and they won't tell you what it is, but I'll tell you what it is. They're talking about bump firing. Bump firing is when you grab the rifle, okay, and regardless of how many rounds are in the magazine, not clip, don't say clip, it's a magazine. Clip is something different. And you loop your thumb around your belt buckle, and then you put your hand or your finger on the trigger, but you don't grip the back of the rifle super tightly, just enough so your finger is going to bump up against the trigger. You pull the trigger once, the rifle recoils, it bounces forward, it hits the trigger again, and it'll do this in rapid succession, giving it a machine gun-like effect. Now, this sounds really dangerous, right? This is going to be gangbangers' paradise if they can do this. There's a problem with this. Number one, you're shooting literally from the side of your hip. Number two, you can't hit the broadside of a barn at 10 feet doing this. This is absolutely no threat to anybody. It just costs a lot of ammo, which is good for the economy. That's it. And that's what they're talking about. So it's not practical. They will fearmonger about it, but it is not something that you can do. In fact, it's kind of dangerous to do to the user, because if that rifle slips, you could shoot yourself, so you shouldn't be doing it anyway. But no, you're not converting your firearm to full auto, you're just misusing it. And not too many people actually do this. Yes, there's lots of internet videos, but most of the places that people that are doing this with their SKSs and stuff like that, they're shooting it into like the side of a sandhill or something like that. Again, if you just look at what they can't hit with it, this does not make any more dangerous. So yes, they are going to ride that wave to sway people to say, see how dangerous these are? Oh, we could get an invasion. Let's put it to you this way. If an army invaded using this bump fire technique, it would get slaughtered. If SWAT team members, okay, if this was really good, SWAT team members would be using this method. Obviously they don't for a reason. Why? Because it's just something you're going to have giggles and fun at. You would never use this tactic to save your life. Every time I hear the firing from the hip thing that the Liberals and NDP and all that talk about, it just tells me how little they know about the firearms. The other thing they're proposing, and if you're a gun owner, you're going to laugh at it, is that gun owners show their possession and acquisition license when they buy their rifles. We've been doing that for 30 freaking years. That was the whole point of the possession and acquisition. Oh my God! Like, how do you fix stupid? You can't. You just can't. I laugh. I cry. I mourn. Because I feel sorry they know not how stupid they actually really are. But that's the whole problem. What the government is proposing in this position is, and this is typical of the Liberals and the NDP. The NDP is actually worse. Right now, trust me, the Liberals are better, but they're going to be bad. Yes, they are going for a gun ban, but how they want to do it is really kind of underhanded and sneaky, which, of course, it would be. What they're going to do is not them ban the guns, they're going to leave it up to the experts. Okay, well, who are the experts? Well, that's bureaucrats. Now, if they sign the United Nations Small Arms Trade Treaty deal, that means gun laws will be made outside the country from people we never elected, we don't even know who they are, but they could over a whim in a night say, your gun laws now are this because of our expert recommendations. In other words, bureaucrats will be making law. Foreign bureaucrats, unelected bureaucrats, will be making law in Canada. This is why I don't like the United Nations in the first place. Now, the thing is what kind of backlash is this going to get when they are responsible? They will always be responsible. That's the goal of government nowadays, is to bring in bad things, but to pass the buck on to somebody else. We'll say, well, it's the RCMP's recommendation. Now, the thing we have as a problem is in Canada is that, yes, the RCMP does make law. No, they are legally not allowed to, but they have been doing this. Almost all our gun regulations come in on a mandate from the RCMP. Almost all of them. And the reason why they kind of make law is because the Liberals just go along with it. Meaning, yes, it is the RCMP making laws. And they've actually done stuff that has been against Bill C-68 in itself. That they don't even follow their own laws. They don't even know what they are, you know. Give you an example. The ban by name, appearance, and reputation, okay, isn't, how could you, appearance, banning something by appearance, not functionality. Because if it comes down to functionality, we'll actually gain firearms rights in the sense that there'll be a whole bunch of guns that we'll be able to buy that we couldn't buy before because they would actually meet the requirement. And I'll use the Dragunov sniper rifle as an example. The SVD sniper rifle, Dragunov sniper rifle, okay, is banned by name, okay? This would fit a non-restricted, it's never been a full auto rifle in its life. It was never designed like that. We have several rifles that are currently legal that are probably even more accurate than it, and the same exact functionality. Semi-auto only. An example of a kind of similar rifle would be my M14, for example. It's very similar to the Dragunov in functionality. Looks a little bit different, but that's it. So why is it banned by name? Well, because sniper isn't a name. Had the Russians called this thing the Dragunov marksman's rifle, then it would probably be have gotten a pass. It would probably be legal right now. So that's banned by name. What about appearance? Well, the Jaeger 22, which has come up a few times because of the RCMP out of nowhere saying, well, this thing looks like an AK-47. It's a 22 caliber, okay, blowback rimfire, much like a Ruger 1022, not much difference in functionality there. No possible way to make this thing full auto, no possible way to fit a 7.62 by 39 AK-47 round in there, nothing similar other than it looks like an AK. No functionality. So it is banned because it looked like that. Now, of course, there was a big fight to get it back, but I think that fight may have been in vain. There you go. Reputation. Well, let's go back to my Norenko M14, which is a typical semi-auto, like an M1A, which is also a Springfield M1A. Shoots a 308 round, semi-auto, legal in Canada, non-restricted for most of them. Some are restricted for shorter barrel lengths. Same with my Norenko, it's non-restricted. I can go out and hunt with it. I can pretty much target shoot with it, which is mostly what I do with it. And it's legal, okay, but yet the reputation of, say, an FNFAL, okay, and in a semi-auto version is banned, even though it shoots the exact same caliber. It's pretty much, other than the cosmetics, the same type of rifle. It functions pretty much the same. Now, what about converting to auto? Well, if you have a Buick load of parts in a machine shop, you can convert anything to full auto. This is a bit of a misnomer because that's just a matter of, like I say, know-how and determination. So you can convert just about anything to full auto if you modify it enough, but the thing is just because you can modify it to full auto does not mean you will. We have the SKSs, which have had basically converted to semi-auto. And they've been just fine. Nobody's been going around converting these things back to full auto. They just don't do it. And this is, again, a solution looking for a problem. People aren't doing this. So it doesn't really matter if a thing is convertible or not because people don't do it. Oh, but they could. Yes, they could do all kinds of things. And they could also just go out and buy an illegal AK-47 that's already got a full auto feature illegally. They could already do that. So if they were going to go, what do you think is more likely? Somebody converting a firearm to full auto for illegal use, or going out and buying an illegal full auto. And that's the other thing is full auto, autos, assault rifles, these buzzwords that they put out on the mainstream media. They call everything an assault rifle now, which is kind of a bit of a made-up term, but more importantly, if we go with a definition of what an assault rifle is, it has to have a select fire switch. And if you don't know what these things are, then why are you worried about them? If you don't know how they function, why are you worried about it? Now, the thing is if it does not have a select fire switch and cannot go into full auto mode, is therefore a semi-auto or a single shot only usually. It's not something that you can easily convert. Most firearms are not that easy to convert. Some may be, and the ones that are, guess what? They're already banned. So again, a problem looking for a solution, or a solution looking for a problem, that type of thing. And that's what we keep getting with the liberals and stuff like that. The problem is we're stuck with these guys for the next 4 years, and it is going to be very bad. Unfortunately, you're saying, yeah, but hey, you know what? It's a good thing they got rid of that long gun registry just in time. Well, like I said right from day one, they're never going to get rid of it. You're saying, no, but they did. They got rid of it. Well, not exactly. Not exactly. Do you remember, okay, Quebec put, and I'm in Quebec here, okay, they put up a big fight to keep the long gun registry. So the deal was, okay, that this registry data would be tied up in the courts, and it was. So it got shot down, okay, and they put up a second challenge to it, and it got shot down. But there was a problem, you see. At the end, when the records were supposed to get destroyed, guess what? Oh, well, it looks like Vic Toes or Steve Blanley didn't quite keep the data in the right place or whatever. So that data went to the courts. I don't know where that data is now. My hunch is the RCMP probably still has it. Now, is the data going to be any good for them? Well, if you've sold your firearm in the past couple of years, probably not. If you're outside of Quebec, probably not. If you're inside Quebec and you've had your firearm for the past 2 or 3 years, and it was registered then, well, it's probably still registered now. It's just a matter of them hitting the enter button to see who's got what where. So that's what I believe is going on. Which court has this tied up? Well, that would be the Supreme Court, I believe. So we'll have to see what happens there. And so if you see mass gun confiscation in Quebec, you'll know they never got rid of it. But the thing is here's the thing. This is probably where it's going to start, is over here in Quebec, because this is the most anti-gun province. Not that the people are anti-gun. It's just this is where the Coalition for Gun Control has one of its biggest supporters in basically the Polytechnique crew there that, can't figure out that it was a mental illness problem, not a gun problem. And the ironies of all that, they brought in all these gun laws in Bill C-68 that was supposed to stop that from ever happening again, and Dawson College happened. Well, that happened. Gang shootings still happen. So not one single gun law has actually saved a single Canadian life in Canada. And there was a 2012 study that showed, peer-reviewed study. Peer-reviewed means nobody's contesting it. That shows statistically the reason why the crime rate is so low in Canada with the firearms, which we don't have a firearms problem here. Again, solution looking for a problem. The reason why it's so low is because of aging demographic. That was the only thing that stayed consistent. As our population ages, crime typically being a young man's sport, guess what? Crime rates go down. And even more importantly, after they did get rid of most of the gun registry stuff, the crime rate with firearms went down again. Why? Because now the people that would normally get dinged for not having a piece of paper with them, now those were most of our crimes. Most of our 40,000 gun-related crimes per year were paper. Yeah, real hardcore criminals there, right? So they got rid of the ATT, which hasn't been fully implemented yet. So I guess that means if you had an authorization to transport for your restricted firearm, you might have to get it again. I do believe the gun laws are going to change very rapidly in this country. We're not talking in years. I'm thinking as soon as they get in, maybe 2-3 days. Gun control is a liberals' crusade. That's the stuff that, trust me, is right on the top of their list. It is at the very top. They know not to talk about it very much because they know most people don't go along with it. But stupidity will hurt. Majority spoke. And you're saying, well, yes, but the majority, there you go, democracy worked. Majority of people would agree with this. Well, no, not exactly. The reason why the Liberals got voted out of office, for 10 years ago was because of a gun registry. The reason why the Harper government got the majority government they got the last time was because the sway vote of the gun owners. This time around, they had a couple things going against them. Bill C-51, I think, was a problem. The Mike Duffy trial, I don't think really made that much of a difference on the Conservatives, because when you rack up scandals between the Conservative government and the Liberals, there is hands down no comparison. The night before the election, the first Liberal scandal is already starting to appear. But anyway, I digress. But the thing is that they screwed themselves, I think, on the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, which, if you were a farmer, you couldn't go along with that. The other thing is the gun owners, again, taken for granted. I can imagine a lot of them probably stayed home, but considering the droves of people that came out, remember, people got promised a lot of free stuff in this election. A lot of free stuff isn't going to be showing up. So things are going to get more expensive. And when that happens, of course, they'll have all kinds of excuses and reasons. But at the end of the day, that's what people voted for, was they were promised, sell the future to live a better now. And you can't spend your way out of debt. That's one thing. So we have a long way to fall economically here in Canada, but not as far as you think, and our economy is quite fragile. So that isn't going to be their number one reason for banning the guns. This is just something that authoritarians have always wanted to do throughout history, and these guys are no different. So they know what the statistics are. So they know that the gun laws in Canada are completely meaningless. So it's really, well, the name tells you everything. Gun control. It's about control. It has nothing to do with lowering crime. It's not crime control. It's not violence control. It's not mental illness control. It's basically, let's ban collective punishment, ban everybody else, demonize the gun owners as much as you possibly can. And the problem is I'm going to throw some statistics out here, just because there's a lot of people that jump in onto these videos and say, well, we should be banning this and banning that and banning this. And you'll see it down in the States too, with the active shooters and stuff like that. A lot of times people are out there, they should do this, they should have had this in place, they should have a background check in place, they should, and all that stuff the perpetrator passed. The last big shooting there, it was the same thing. The guy bought the guns legally. He passed a background check. Those laws were already there, and they're proposing to bring in the same laws they already have. They don't work. So, should we have no laws? No, we should have some laws. The regulations, if it doesn't pertain to safety or common sense, there's really no use in doing it, because it will not work. The biggest thing people have to get into their mind is you cannot legislate crazy. And criminal is an occupation. I cannot stress that enough. If you truly understand what that means, you truly understand how pointless most of the gun laws are. Now, things like where you can discharge a firearm, I'm okay with those kind of laws. Most gun owners are. Training people with firearms in Canada, yes, I do believe it is a powerful thing. They can be dangerous in the hands of fools or the uneducated. Firearms, I believe everybody that handles a firearm should know their acts and proofs. They should take a course. They should know how to safely handle a firearm. Nobody is contesting that part of it. Unsafe storage laws, okay, that's an area where Canadians have to lock up their firearms and stuff like that, which most Canadians would do it regardless. You'd lock up your firearms regardless. I mean, that falls into the common sense thing, where you lock up your firearms, okay, when you're not around them. But when you're around, you should be able to easily access them. Again, common sense. So we know to keep the ammo separate from the rifles, to keep them away from the children. Now, the problem with the unsafe storage laws, and this is one of the biggest things that our gun crime is that every single offense pertaining to firearms is a criminal offense. There are no misdemeanors. Everything is a criminal offense, means punishable by extreme fines at the minimum, and punishable by jail time almost on everything. So you miss a piece of paper, you go to jail for 3 years. That type of thing. You commit an actual crime with it, okay, yeah, you go to jail for 10 to 15 years. Most people are okay with that. Nobody's contesting that stuff, because that makes sense. As gun owners, law-abiding gun owners, you're saying if somebody does bad with a gun, you're making us all look bad. So we're like, throw the book at them. But where we get kind of huff-puffed is, oh, you pulled a pin out of that magazine. Oh, there you go. You're going to go to jail for 3 to 5 years. Stuff like that is stupid. Barrel length restrictions. Yes, we have them. Very stupid. Again, if you don't know what the Canadian gun laws are, before you propose more gun laws, go look at the RCMP website. It'll tell you everything we have to go through. Now, how was your daily background check today? Do you know what I'm talking about? Well, if you're a gun owner, you do. Now, pedophiles, okay, they go through a daily background check. So do gun owners, meaning they don't trust us at all. We go through a background check every single day through the RCMP database. We go through a background check, whether we did something or not. So again, you say, well, maybe you should because you have a very dangerous weapon. Anything can be a dangerous weapon. A fork in the hands of a maniac is a dangerous weapon. People have been killed by fists, feet, hammers, and all kinds of stuff. In fact, one of the most unlikely ways to die in Canada is by a firearm. We're talking about less than 200 people a year, almost every year since 1966. In fact, you may be not aware of this, but we have the lowest crime rate in Canada since 1966, including firearms. The way it works here in Canada, in the murder section, or homicides, is knives. I think last year were like 180 stabbings resulting in a homicide, and something like 80 some odd shootings resulting in homicides. The rest are hands and feet, cars, wood chippers, baseball bats, knuckle dusters. You get it. People, when they want to kill somebody, they will do this. Now, that said, the other thing to keep in mind is about 3 out of every 4, on average, firearms used in a crime are illegal, meaning there is no registry to them. They came in probably illegally over the border from the United States, and they have no serial numbers on them. They're not, the person that holds them is not a legal gun owner. They're prohibited from owning firearms if they're a felon, etc., etc. The other thing is 3 out of every 4 obviously were never registered, and 4 out of every 5 are never recovered. So this is the typical crimes with firearms, and almost 3 out of every 4 are typically handguns. So mostly legal handguns is what. Now, who does these crimes? Well, it was interesting in 2012. Again, some interesting facts here. They polled it around Toronto, where the highest crime rate was in Toronto was this area with the least amount of legal ownership, and the supporting or surrounding areas with the highest amount of gun ownership had virtually no crime. So there was something wrong here, meaning the law-abiding citizens that bought their firearms over the counter legally, showing their IDs and showing their possession acquisition license and following all the gun laws, for some reason just weren't committing crimes. So is that the gun laws working? No, that's just law-abiding people following the law. That's all you got there. So by punishing them, it does nothing. So what about those people that were buying these firearms illegally? Well, we don't know who they were. Why? They weren't in the system. Strangely. Again, it's kind of like criminals in occupation, right? So what else can we say about gun owners in Canada? Well, if you are not a gun owner in Canada, per 100,000, you're 0.18% of a likely chance to commit a crime in Canada. If you're a police officer in Canada, per 100,000 people, you're 1.2% of a chance likely to commit a crime in Canada. If you're a legal gun owner in Canada, per 100,000 people, you're 0.6% of a chance of committing a crime in Canada. Meaning, Canadian gun owners are 3 times less likely to use a firearm or anything, or even just break the law, period. Think about that. Plus with our daily background checks, that kind of makes us the most trustworthy people in the country. Well, it doesn't make it. Well, it does make us that. It's not supposed. We are statistically the most law-abiding and safest people in the country, and people want to disarm us. What will that do for everybody else? Well, it won't probably do anything for anybody else. But now you have people that are disarmed. That's it. The crime rates will still go on the same way they are. The main reason why they're coming down, again, with the 2012 study that was done, was aging population. So what happens when the economy starts getting tough and the crime rates start going up again, and after they've banned all kinds of guns and stuff? And we saw it in Australia. The crime rate went pretty high. But again, that probably has less to do with more guns, less crime, or more crime, less guns. It has to do with a lot of other things, gangs and stuff like that. That's what you need to focus on. Mental health, gangs, criminality. It is statistically proven that the number one factor in lowering crime is more police. There's no doubt about that. You can't knock it. That's the statistics globally. UNESCO, yes, I'm not a UN fan, but yes, they've got those statistics too. And globally, the crime rates are going down. Now, mind you, there's a lot of war going on, so will those places. But let's look at some of the places that have the highest crime rates in the world. Well, if you'd think the United States has the highest crime rate in the world, you'd be way, way wrong. No, it's usually going to be either El Salvador, Bolivia, or Honduras. These places, astronomically high crime rates. And guess what? Gun ownership, not necessarily legal there. Again, complete gun ban. Let's take two populations, roughly, two island nations, Jamaica and Iceland. Iceland, 300,000 people, barely any crime there. They have a murder every few years. Greenland, murder every few years. Well, Jamaica, with basically about 2.5 million people or so, give or take, they have about 1,200 murders a year. So when you work that out per capita, that's a pretty high number. Here, we're under 500, around 500. Usually never go over 6. And I think it was like 245 or something like that in the last crime report. And it was, again, at a 66-year low. Or, sorry, it was 505, I think, 66-year low. That's good. So it's moving in the right direction. So why all the laws? Why ban everything when there's no reason to ban anything? And particularly when that's not what most crimes are. Most crimes, again, hands, feet, and knives. Knife crime crimes with knives. We should always put the terminology right. It's not gun crime. It's not knife crime. It's crimes with knives, crimes with guns. It's crime. It's people doing bad things. And there's virtually no regulations on knives. There are some, but there's virtually no regulations on knives. And yet, we go after the guns for what reason again? Again, what's the case for it? What is the reasoning for all this stuff? So say, yeah, but they haven't done it yet. But they're going to. They've already talked about it. The United Nations Small Arms Trade Treaty deal has been on the list for the Liberals and the NDP. They can't wait to hand the country over to the United Nations. That's their whole policy. They're very communist-minded in that sense. That socialism is the stepping stone to communism. And you're saying, whoa, where does communism come in all this? Policy. Policy is what tells you what's going on. And if you look at anything coming from the United Nations is pretty much communist-based. For the most part. If you understand the 10 pillars of communism, it might be more on the light side, but it is definitely that. So handguns. Well, there's no reason to have handguns in Canada. Nobody needs them. Again, we're looking at a solution, looking for a problem. They're not a problem in Canada. There are so few of it. What about police safety, though? Well, again, during the Bill C-42, was it Bill C or Bill C-42, Bill C-391, when they were trying to get rid of the long gun registry, Randy Kuntz, basically a police officer himself, or ex-police officer himself, polled 2,600 police officers across Canada whether they thought the long gun registry was a good idea. And 2,410 of them said, no, get rid of it. Why? Because if they looked at this thing, okay, and they walked through a door expecting no gun, let's say in the police cruiser, it showed that this person wasn't a possessions acquisition license holder or a firearms owner, and they had no guns registered to them. If they went in with that preconception, okay, that could get them killed. So a lot of guys choose not to look at it whatsoever. Why? They want to go in there expecting the unexpected. That's the way they have to do it. And if they didn't do that, they could end up killed. But it's not just the guns you have to worry about. There's knives, there's bats, there's chairs. Maybe you might get pushed out a window. Who knows? If somebody wants to do harm to somebody else, there's really not much to stop them. The only thing you can do is deal with them. And we're not even going to talk about the self-defense side of it here in Canada yet, because I've done a lot of videos on that. This is basically getting us ready to get preemptive, okay, because it's going to be coming. What we need to do is have a peaceful referendum on our gun property rights. The problem here in Canada, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the father of our now Prime Minister, who's long passed away, one of the things when he brought in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which were charter rights that we already had, natural given, God-given rights that we already had, but he just kind of brought them to the front page, which was, hands off to him. That was a good thing. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is very reflective of Canadian values. There's no question about that. But one of the things he purposely left out, was property ownership. That, we didn't have the right to property ownership. And a lot of this is for basically, if somebody wants to, basically land, if they want to put a highway through your front door, so to speak, land expropriation, they could do this if you didn't have any property rights. If you had property rights and you said no, you got to put your highway around my farm or whatever, that would really throw a monkey wrench in their plan. But that also covers little things such as firearms. Now, someone who might make the argument, well, if you can have a firearm, why can't you have a nuke or a tank or a rocket launcher? That's not what people are asking for. Gun owners aren't asking for ridiculous stuff like that, so I don't know why people bring up that argument. But there's different things. Number one, a tank is a vehicle. Okay, you have to get a license for that. Why? Because it's a vehicle. Okay, and number two, it is not for target practice. Technically, it is not for hunting. And it is not something that you are going to give to the general public. It is a machine of war. Now, firearms can be a machine of war, granted, but that's user-based, meaning if you give a C7 rifle to a soldier, he's a soldier. You give a C7 rifle to a hunter, a guy out there hunting coyotes, he's a coyote hunter with a C7 rifle. You know, if you give a C7 rifle to a target shooter, he's a target shooter with a C7 rifle. So it's user-based, right? Now, as far as an RPG, well, environmental laws. You can't go around just blowing stuff up at random. You know, there is, you know, that's explosives. That's not firearms. It's explosives. What about nukes? Well, definitely some environmental concerns there. And number two, it just, you know, nobody's going to be asking for that stuff. So when people put these ridiculous things, doesn't discredit firearms owners because they're not asking for that. They're saying, get rid of ban by name, appearance, reputation. That is the laws we're dealing with now. Get rid of that. We don't need to ban things just for the sake of banning things. Again, a solution looking for a problem. Get rid of barrel length restrictions. Get rid of forcing gun owners to only be able where they can use certain firearms, not others. For example, restricted firearms here in Quebec can only be used on a gun range. There's no reason why you shouldn't be allowed to hunt with them or carry them in the bush or what have you. Anywhere it's safe to use a firearm, you should be allowed to use a firearm. Where it's not safe to use a firearm, for example, shooting pop cans in the middle of a suburban residence, probably not recommended. But we have laws that tell you how far you have to be from places where you can and cannot shoot. People don't have problems with those things. But the ridiculously stupid stuff like that, you know, banning by name, appearance, reputation is a big one. But just the idea of banning without any evidence or proof or need. This is the other thing. And the other thing is what the last government did, okay, was they put the control of firearms classification here in Canada into the hands of a very selected committee, very professional, that type of thing. They were in the works of that, but it hasn't flourished. So, you know, it is, you know, we've lost that. We almost had that. But what the new government is proposing, okay, or has suggested they're going to propose, is to hand that over to, again, unelected bureaucrats, professionals, as they're going to call them. They're going to brand it as that, but really you're looking at police chiefs that just want to ban every firearm on the planet. So that's just the way it is. There's no formula for it. The Canadians Firearms Centre, where they make these decisions of which firearms are banned in Canada and what are not, you cannot get in control with these. The only thing you can do is fax them. Good luck getting a fax coming back. And you cannot challenge very easily a ruling from these people, meaning if they classify a firearm a certain way, it goes against Bill C-68 in itself, saying, well, this is banned for nothing. To undo a challenge of that is astronomically expensive and almost impossible to do. So you can't refute any of their draconian laws. So these are really poor systems. This is not for the people. Now, in Canada, if you were to poll it, you'd probably get 10% that are completely ban everything because they don't know any better, and we believe that these gun laws are working, but they statistically are not. They have no effect. They're a false sense of security. And on the other side, you got 10% of people that are from my cold dead hand, you know, very pro-gun. I might kind of fall into that category myself. And then you have about 80% of people in the middle that are kind of swayable one way or the other. They're moderate. But the thing is every time we did have the conversation on, say, the CBC, what you notice is people kind of tend to go more pro-firearm. Now, right now, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, from what I hear, and the CSSA is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I can imagine the Canadian National Firearms Association, or the CNFA, their membership just spiked overnight kind of thing. I'm pretty sure what happened in the early 90s with the long gun registry is probably going to happen again. The night before the registry came in, so to speak, people went out duck hunting and farming, or varmint shooting or whatever, and a whole bunch of people lost their guns. There was like the night of the most hunting boat accidents I've ever seen. Basically, everybody's boat kind of capsized, and they lost all their guns in the river somewhere. And of course, that happened to people burying their guns, whatever. But I think we don't have to get to that. I think what we need to do, though, is be preemptive. Don't wait till they start proposing the legislation. Let them know now. I guess I'll put the links down below. I'll have to search out some new links because now we have a changing of the guard. So if you do come across some of my older gun videos, the parties that are there are going to be switched around a bit. So it doesn't hurt to call, but let your MPs and MLAs know how you're going to vote. Because remember, these guys want to stay in for more than one term. So that's a big one. But the other one too is we really can't rely on these bureaucrats to run our lives like this. What we really need to do is get proactive and have a referendum on the issue. Get the repeal of Bill C-68, sensible gun laws. If it doesn't pertain to safety or common sense, there's no reason to keep it. Are there some things that work? Yes, gun training always works. Statistically, it has lowered the accident rate in Canada. So how many accidental shootings are there in Canada? Well, that's a good question. Well, on a year, accidental deaths, okay, not suicides. We don't include suicides, although the anti-gunners always include suicides, but that's a separate issue because suicides are mostly done with other things other than firearms. But typically, even after locking up our firearms, yes, the suicide rate by a firearm went down, but the suicide rate has never been lower, or never been higher, so to speak. I mean, they just, people that would have shot themselves ended up hanging themselves. Because again, we go after the inanimate object. We treat the symptom, not the illness. We need to treat mental health. We need to treat, and go after criminals. That's what we need to do. But we also looked at, if you look statistically here in Canada at, training. With the training, yes, accidental shootings have gone down a lot, and we're typically talking between 45 and 50 people every year that accidentally kill themselves with firearms. Now you're saying, well, yeah, but that's a lot of people. Well, it's down by an awful lot. But here's the thing. Most of those are training accidents with law enforcement and military. That's the bulk of it. So very few hunters or children or whatever get a hold of firearms, and odd tragedies do happen from time to time, but again, almost non-existent. People worry about children finding firearms in the house and getting killed and stuff like that, which is a legitimate concern. But then they can turn a completely blind eye to driving and texting, which has killed thousands of people. Yeah, it's if we're talking about public safety, let's put it where it is, or the amount of children that die in swimming pools every year, which is quite a few, in the thousands again. So the anti-gun movement is really just about control. It has nothing to do with safety. And it's also, they get funding. So I can imagine the Coalition for Gun Control will be head over heels to get new funding, almost guaranteed. Now, there's another problem too, is their best argument is to ban the conversation. So meaning people in the States, for example, they want to make it illegal to put out firearm statistics because the statistics are damning them. That's the problem. Facts, logic, and reason and statistics kind of trump what we think, we believe, and we feel. So that's the big deal, that they can't challenge you on an open, honest debate. They have no grounds to stand on. This is the problem. But then it brings it back again. If you were anti-gun, okay, that's fine and dandy. I don't care about that. But when you say, yeah, we should ban all guns, okay, but then the statistics show that it's in favor of the gun owners all the time. And even when people pull out statistics from the States, you have to understand, and I'll give you some of the statistics from the States. Now, mind you, the States has a lot more gangs. They're 10 times our population. You have to factor that in. Okay, now, in the States, okay, about 2.5 to 3 million times a year, Americans use firearms in self-defense, okay? But 1 in every 1,000 is a shooting. About 1 in every 8,000 is a fatality. And about 1 in every million legal gun owners does something stupid. Here in Canada, about 80,000 times a year, Canadians use firearms in self-defense, mostly against four-legged predators. But between 3,400 and 3,600 times a year, Canadians use firearms in self-defense against two-legged predators. However, because they always get charged, this will add to the crime rate, meaning it's almost all but illegal to defend yourself with anything in Canada, let alone a firearm. So that's what you're looking at there. Now, just give you an idea from the women's side of it, in the States, I think 300 and some odd thousand women defended themselves from their attackers in 2013. I don't know what it was the past 2 years, because crime rate statistics usually come out every 2 years or so, sometimes every four, whatever it might be, depending on where you are. But where people have the most guns, the crime is typically lowered by 30 to 40% in the states where they have the right to carry and defend themselves. The crime rate across the board typically goes down. In fact, Panama, a communist country, has recently installed carry laws. Yes, even they get it, because they were looking at the FBI data and say, hey, well, where people are allowed to carry their guns, the crime rate goes down. It works. Nobody wants to get shot. And assholes have one of the best senses of self-preservation on the planet. They'll go get a job. So it works and it works. The other thing is that also, too, you have to factor in that with that said, okay, the more firearms you have is not really what raises and lowers your crime rate. It's being allowed to use them in self-defense. If you are allowed to use a firearm in self-defense, people typically don't want to get shot. They will not. They'll move on to another area. Now, where there's strict gun control, like say in Chicago, which has the strictest gun control in the United States, for example, they have the highest crime rate there. Why? Because they have a gang problem there. It has nothing to do with the guns. That's, in Utah, where they have like virtually no gun laws whatsoever, it's usually lower there. In other places, some of the most heavily armed places in the states are the lowest crime rates. So you can look at that it really has nothing to do with the gun in the sense of more guns, less crime, or more crime, less guns. What it is if you're allowed to defend yourself, people typically don't push the limit. We don't have those laws here in Canada, but that said, even at that, if you look at the amount of people shot in the United States, if you factor in the suicides, you're looking at about 130,000 people. That's a lot of people, but that's mostly suicides. Again, you're looking at an issue that they won't tackle, mental health issues. But what about murders? Well, murders is at a 22-year low in the United States by firearm. Okay, so you're typically talking about 6,000 to 9,000 people getting murdered on an average in the past couple of years, down from like 30,000. So that's pretty good. But out of that, maybe about a third is with firearms. And what about these dreaded assault rifles? You're looking at less than 300 people a year in the United States with these so-called assault rifles or AR-15 types. Very, very low. Mass shootings, despite the media coverage, is not on the rise. It's not on the rise. It's just, a tool for gun control, right? That said, what about in Canada? How many people get killed by assault rifles in Canada? Well, virtually none. Why? Because we don't have assault rifles in Canada. We have semi-autos, and even with semi-autos, it's very, very rare. Most of the crimes committed is young men shooting other young men that have lifestyle problems over gang turfs. That's most of what it is. So if we treat our drug addicts, that will get rid of the gangs. Why? Because they're the cartel. They're the couriers for the cartels. So until we treat the problems and not the symptoms, some of the byproducts might be people going around shooting each other. But that said, when we're talking less than 100 people per year getting shot, and definitely always less than 200 people per year getting shot by firearms, is there at a 33.5 million people? You can work that out per 100,000. What your likelihood of getting shot by a firearm is? It's very low, which means a gun ban is not justified. Our heritage, our rights, our freedoms, there's no reason for it. But we have to get out ahead of this thing, because yes, Australian style gun control is the least of our problems. Total gun ban. They will start with the handguns. They will go to the semi-autos. Tony Bernardo from the Canadian Shooting Sports Association says the RCMP has 6 on the list right now. I could pretty much guess which ones those are, and then on it. Yeah. Sorry about that little interruption. Yeah, so it's probably going to be most likely the 6 non-restricted is going to be SKS and Noranco M14 like I have. Probably the Tavor, I would imagine the XCR, and Swiss Sig 550 and CZ 858s. Those are going to probably go away at the dodo. Next to that, I wouldn't doubt it if all AR types and handguns will be banned first. Then after all those semi-autos are gone, then all those people, well, I don't have semi-autos. I don't have to worry about this. Yes, you do. Pump actions, lever actions, then bolt actions, brake barrels, then nothing, right? Oh, guns are too dangerous for you to have. You shouldn't be allowed to have them. But again, the statistics are on the side of gun owners. In the hands of a well-trained Canadian gun owner, guns are perfectly safe. Perfectly safe. So I'm going to leave it at that. So I'm going to put links down below. Call your MPs, MLAs. This time we don't have anybody on our side. None of them were ever on our side. Again, the Conservatives were gun neutral at best, but none of them are on our sides now. We are in the fight of our life. You got a Liberal majority with an NDP, little minority, and then you've got the Conservatives as the minority government. But if you combine the Liberals with the NDP, you have a super huge majority, meaning we have nobody on our sides right now. So even if we call the Conservatives, which we should, unfortunately we need a Canada First party, not a we need people that are in favor of Canadian property ownership. That's for sure. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that. So yeah, we need to do a referendum on this. But anyway, this is just, I'm sure I'll be making a lot more videos. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. If you like this kind of content, links down below to make a donation. And thank you very much to everybody who has. Rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourselves, be true to others. Call your MPs, call them MLAs. Let them know you want to keep your guns. And yeah, we're in the fight now. So be true to yourselves, be true to others. Always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. G'day, hi, and welcome. Alright, this is a video I make with great regret, fear, and just complete utter disappointment for liberty and freedom. Well, we got a new government, changing of the guard, regime change here in Canada, figure of speech, sure. We have Justin Trudeau as our new Prime Minister. And what this video is really about is what we might be expecting in the very near future for, well, we can't really say gun rights in Canada because we never really had gun rights in Canada. From 1898, they've been trying to disarm the people here in Canada ever since then. With the first laws of the BNA Act, basically making handguns, only for, British subjects and stuff like that, and then requiring permits to have a firearm in your home to be able to protect your home or your business. And then from there on, it's always gotten slightly more, authoritarian. And of course, up until the 1950s, we pretty much had machine gun ownership where you could own just about anything. But we've had handgun registry since 1934, which has yet to save a single life or stop a single crime, or it doesn't work. But yet it's been around that long, and it costs millions of dollars a year just to upkeep those pieces of paper in a database somewhere. And of course, in the 1970s, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the father of our now current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, pretty much started the strict gun control footsteps that we see now, and banning of many semi-autos, and of course converting all autos and stuff like that to semi-auto. And then of course by the 1980s we've seen other bills come in, Bill C-17, Bill an older Bill C-51, and then of course the Bill C-68. And of course, Bill C-68 is the standing bill that terrorizes gun owners as we speak. But it's going to get worse because there's a new bill on the horizon. It was proposed a little while ago, but it's probably going to come into full flourishing. I believe it is Senate Bill S-231. Pretty sure that's the bill. It was shot down at the time. And it was the Hunters and Anglers and Sports Shooters Act, or whatever it was called. I kind of forget a bit. But anyway, it was shot down. But the proposals in this thing were just completely off the wall for gun owners. It would essentially is the beginning of a gun ban in Canada. And this is definitely going to take place. There's no doubt about it now. By the end of the 4 years of the Trudeau run, there will be probably zero gun ownership in this country. And if there is any gun ownership, black powder might be still allowed. Maybe bolt actions, maybe brake barrels will be allowed, but I doubt it. Lever action, pump action, definitely semi-autos and handguns will be gunned, regardless of what classification they were previously. My reasoning for this is just going by the what they were talking, Justin Trudeau himself was talking about. And of course, if you listen to the Liberal Party members, they're almost all anti-gun, and they almost all take their cue from the Coalition from Gun Control. For gun control, who is basically an NDP associate that really has brought in the Coalition for Gun Control has brought in basically gun laws through the United Nations. Now, the United Nations put out a gun law mandate a few years back. Australia adopted it, and they took probably the brunt of the stick. The UK adopted it. They're under way more restriction than us. And then, of course, Norway adopted it, and probably a few other countries, and we adopted it. But we took it, probably the most mild dose was here in Canada. Now, that said, the list of firearms banned in Canada is massive. There are a lot of firearms we do get to enjoy for now, but those firearms will almost all but disappear overnight. For example, all the restricteds are pretty much going to be banned. Justin Trudeau himself, and I quote, we need to implement Australian-style gun control in Canada. And if you have ever seen what happened to the Australians' beautiful firearms that they had, they did a buyback program, of course, and then, bought back, hundreds of firearms, and then they just did outright confiscation. And, basically people would have XYZ amount of time to bring their firearms to a depot where they would chop them up. Now, of course, if the RCMP does this, I don't know if this happened to the Australians, and if you're Australian, I'm pretty sure you'll probably let me know if this did. But I can guarantee you, not only will they chop up our firearms in front of us here in Canada, but they're going to charge you a fee to do this. Guarantee some sort of stupid environment, sustainable development, Agenda 21 pollution fee of basically, hey, well, those chop saw blades aren't cheap, so fork it over. Here you go. Here's your bill for us cutting up your beautiful firearm, and you better say thank you, sir. May I have another? And that's pretty much what's going to happen to us. Now, that said, where's it going to start? Well, it's going to start with the restricteds. ARs guaranteed to be banned. Now, Tony Bernardo from the Shooting Sports Association said that the problem is what they want to do. Okay, number one is sign the United Nations Small Arms Trade Treaty deal. Now, Trudeau has talked about this, and he's flip-flopped back and forth, not really giving you a conclusive answer. So that's technically a yes, he will sign it. That's why he won't tell you directly, because they know that the gun issue is a huge issue here in Canada. Yes, the CBC is biased against firearms, but you notice how they never really cover the issue hardly at all, and it's for one purposeful reason, because every time they do, the only thing they expose is how little they know about actual Canadian gun laws, and more importantly, how the statistics are heavily in favor of gun owners in Canada, meaning the Liberals have a solution looking for a problem, not the other way around. So right now, one of the solutions for the problems they're looking for is basically, to find firearms to demonize. That's so, right now what the CBC's out there doing is talking about a way to convert almost every semi-auto into a full auto. And what they're talking about, and they won't tell you what it is, but I'll tell you what it is. They're talking about bump firing. Bump firing is when you grab the rifle, okay, and regardless of how many rounds are in the magazine, not clip, don't say clip, it's a magazine. Clip is something different. And you loop your thumb around your belt buckle, and then you put your hand or your finger on the trigger, but you don't rip the back of the rifle super tightly, just enough so your finger is going to bump up against the trigger. You pull the trigger once, the rifle recoils, it bounces